Alright, hit the button and such. So another broadcast day. Blah, 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 blah. So we'll fix the chat. And move along. And figure out where to put things so I can get to them. Seems good enough. This chat thing, I gotta move this chat thing. Yeah, there. Good enough. Probably could put it down here and it'd be less harmful, maybe. I don't know. See how that goes. Oh, I have to move it behind the other thing. Yeah, I just gotta do something. I'll just do it to crap. Alright, that'll probably work. Oh, until I need to read the chat, then it won't work, and I'll have to do that again. Well, I can do that again. No big deal. Alright. Getting to the videos shortly. Just, again, takes a little bit of this crapola. Alright, so we'll start with this crap video from this lying sack of shit. This bar guy. I guess I'll reload it just so we can get see if there's any comments on a complete lie video. Alright, so he ends with that conclusion, which is absolute. Come on, play the fucking video. Jeez, YouTube is so damn annoying. Let's see, pause there. Okay. According to draft science physics, theoretically, the small mass object can never bounce back. So I've never said that. It's not part of the theory. I've explicitly explained the experiment, and we've been over it in really gross, great detail, frankly. And it's just such a fucking lie. Yeah. People should get away with that crap. Alright, so the problem is, I gotta get rid of these things now. That's what I'll do then, I'll just get rid of them. Alright. To return later. So, I mean, to have to go through it again, it's just so pathetic. So I did a ballistic pendulum type experiment to try to illustrate it. Brozo's done numerous attempts at it. None filmed very well, unfortunately. And, we've searched the internet and found whatever, a dozen or more examples of the experiment, all with some kind of flaw or another in terms of precision or quality or, the ability to scrutinize the experiment and say, did they really do what they say they're doing, or was there room for finagling? Did they do any finagling? So the simple premises is their wacky physics says, okay, because they combine the two formulas, right? They combine 1/2 mv squared with E equals, momentum mv. And so they make a bastardization of this formula that basically says, anytime you bang a small thing into a big thing, you lose kinetic energy. Anytime you do the opposite, you gain, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so you crash this one mass going, whatever, it doesn't matter what velocity it is, into the two mass, and whatever velocity you give it, okay, you're instead of, as Professor Lewin says, twice the mass, half the velocity, instead of that happening, and there's springs attached, of course, you get 2/3 the velocity here. So you have twice the mass, and you end up with 2/3 the velocity. So that's, in momentums, let's just say that's 133. This started with 100. And this goes back with 33. Alright, so that's basically the experiment. So I call it the free momentum experiment. Can't really make any sense. There's lots of different ways to create the same scenario, in the sense that I could just have this one mass crash into two objects, appropriately shaped, let's say. Two one masses. And then I somehow am going to, through some miracle, crash these two things, send this one this way, send this one this way, and that's zero momentum, and I get to keep all my momentum this way. So I can make 50 here and 50 here, and I keep all my 100. And I come out with 100 plus these two. I mean, can't make any sense, this idea of opposite momentum. Okay, I mean, it's not a real thing. It don't work in space. NASA wouldn't use it. It's illogical on its face. Can't possibly be how the universe works, because frankly, if I'm increasing my momentum going in a direction, okay, I could capitalize on it. So I've said this over and over again. So this lying weasel, instead of dealing with my actual argument, the one that kind of blows his theory to bits, his theory that I'm wrong somehow, that you could just reduplicate the experiment. So you just start off with a small mass on a pendulum, let's just say, it doesn't matter. You push it in with energy into the 2, okay, and then you hit that into a 4, okay, and then you hit that into an 8, okay. Alright, so you're doubling the mass each time, the impacts, and you're increasing by, well, I already figured it out, and by this time you're up to like almost 300. I think it's almost, let's just say it's 200 at this point. So you've gained 200. Okay, so you start with 100 momentum, and now you have 200 momentum, and then all you have to do is put it on a lever. Okay, just have that one bang into the lever, and you have the 1 here again. Okay, 8 units of distance difference. So there's 8 units of distance from the fulcrum, so the fulcrum would be like here. Alright, so then you're back to a 1. Okay, you conserve the momentum because you're supposed to be obligated to do that, and you just do the same thing over again. Okay, 2, 4, okay, and 8. So this is my just making the point that I can exploit it. So unless he wants to basically say that the levers really don't work at all, the levers are completely unfunctional, but I don't know if I don't know, he won't say. He's just too weak a character. He has so little character as a human being. He won't take a stand. He'll just make accusations, from his, I'm not going to take responsibility for the implications of what I say. Alright, so obviously I could make this device, and it would just keep running faster and faster and faster, and I could siphon off as much energy as I want to as free momentum, as free energy, because there's nothing that would stop it from making more and more momentum. Again, this would end up with, well, this has 100, this says 200, it would convert 200 here. Okay, so now you're starting with 200, doing the same thing, and end up with 300 here, right? Then you're starting with 300, and it would just keep increasing and increasing. To be 200 here, it would have to double the velocity it has here. So you just keep doubling the velocity. With each run, you're doubling the velocity, doubling the velocity, doubling the velocity, and you can take all of that energy off the system. So you just basically have a free energy machine. So it can't be the truth, because it was too easy to exploit. If I'm making free energy in this direction, I have extra momentum going in a direction. I can't undo it by sending something the other way. It doesn't work. Can't happen. Alright, in reality, this takes energy. I can't send two things out without them both being energy. I have to account for them. Okay, so I can't come in with 100 momentum and then make 166 momentums leave the experiment. I can't put 100 into the box and magically get 166 flying out. It's not possible. So instead of dealing with this argument, he just completely lies about what I've previously stated. And part of it, he actually is conceding the point that I make, and then he just pretends he didn't pay any attention to that clear statement that I did make. So we'll just go through a couple of the slides. I mean, so all he's doing is explaining this experiment. Okay, first he explains how to read slides. So he's just explaining the experiment, okay, and then he has this little bit in here about what I say, okay. It's in there somewhere. Alright, yeah, it's still just explaining, okay, so, here it says it right here, half the velocity at best. So it says right there in the slide, oh, you can't see that, I have to remember these details. Okay, so it says right here in the slide, Okay. This is draft science physics, he calls it. I mean, this is just so arrogant and such a lie. Oh, it's still playing, unfortunately. Stop playing. Where'd that slide go? There it is. Okay, after collision, half the velocity at best. So it's just saying the best you could possibly do when you're hitting a two mass is give it all of the momentum. So that's the best you could do, is have a complete transfer. And as I've pointed out, you can't expect a perfect transfer because it's uneven masses and it's a little tricky. Just a fact. Okay. Springs make it worse in the sense that springs sort of guarantee that you're going to have energy going back the other way. But anyway, we can talk about how springs change the experiment. Nobody else wants to do that. I've done that. But these cowards won't do any of it. They won't show you how a spring works. Nothing. Alright, at best, in this situation, all the initial momentum is transferred to the 2K object. Yeah, and I never claimed that was possible. And why does it say half the velocity at best? He's clearly quoting exactly what I said. That's the best you could possibly expect, is to get all the momentum in. I never suggested you could expect that as an outcome. Therefore, the 1K has no momentum after the collision. This isn't something I asserted as how the experiment comes out. I never stated that. When I did it on my porch, it didn't come out that way. So why don't you just keep lying? The fact is, though, is that, it did come out close to that. The recoil, if you want to call it that, the bounce back was nowhere near 33% of the momentum. It was a lot less than that. Therefore, it has zero velocity, whatever. So this is the lie. So he just goes from this half the velocity at best statement to this preposterous lie that I said it comes out a certain way. I didn't say that. It's just a fucking lie. Because that's all they got is lies. They can't deal with the actual arguments made. They just constantly have to lie. So he says, this is his assertion, this is wrong. Because in reality, the 1K object will always bounce back. Well, do you know that they always bounce back? Do you have a fucking goddamn proof that that happens in the first place? I'd say, no, you don't. Okay, that you can't create any circumstance where there's no bounce back and you get a complete conversion. And I would argue that clearly the way springs change the experiment, you could make some argument that maybe it is possible, but who knows? But anyway, it was never my assertion. My assertion was you had to conserve the momentum. So nowhere in here do you say, Gary overtly and directly asserts you have to conserve the momentum. So whatever you have after, doesn't matter what direction it's going, it has to be all of the momentum. And that's the statement made. You fucking liar. Oh, God, these people are just such goddamn scum. So this is a pretty easy argument. So he's saying he's got me on something that is nowhere near a got you, because he actually quoted my statement, which says at best. If you got all of the energy from the one object into the other object, it would go, as Professor Lewin overtly says, twice the mass, half the velocity. Alright, so he says again, the momentum is now less than the initial momentum, which I never claimed would be possible. So, again, just completely lie about what I've overtly and directly said. I mean, it's just such a scumbag. According to Gary, the remaining momentum is stored in the bounce back of the 1K object. It isn't stored. It's obviously being released. A piece of the momentum stays in the object and it goes back. That's right. You throw a ball at the brick wall and it bounces back. You don't call that stored. Oh, you fucking asshole. And the whole point is this guy speaks enough English that he could make this video instead of this crap. So this is another way for him to not take accountability for the lying he's doing by actually speaking his lies. If you're going to lie, you ought to have the balls to at least make your lies with your own fucking voice, in your own face, you fucking lying sack of shit. Alright, this doesn't make sense. Yeah, well, it doesn't. The way you've described it, which is nothing like how I described it. So you're just lying about what I said, okay, and contriving some excuse that you can say, well, that doesn't make sense. Well, that's not what I said, you fucking liar. All right. Let's see. So, because the outgoing velocity is precisely half the speed. So again, I never said it leaves at precisely half the speed. So he quotes me as saying at best, and then he says somehow I said it precisely leaves at half the speed. Never said that. It didn't happen on my porch when I did the fucking experiment. Just a fucking lie. Alright, so that's enough of that crap. But I just can't believe after all this bullshit, after the 400 videos on this subject, this fucking liar would go this desperate where he has to just make up crap I never fucking goddamn said. I mean, it's so despicable. These fucking lying cowards. So let's read their lying coward comments. Yeah, you can see that. Who cares? John Walker and his goofy crap, right? Let's just see if he says anything. Momentum and kinetic energy are both conserved here. So that makes absolutely no sense. Just 0 sense, because momentum is only conserved if you think there's opposite energy. So again, how do they explain? I mean, realistically, how do they explain it? I mean, there's so many ways I could just redo the experiment in some other way where I have a 2 mass. I could just make the 2 mass into 2 different objects. And you're basically saying that somehow, you know, if I shot an arrow into 2 objects and pushed them both in these, you know, directions that have opposite components, that somehow I can take all of that momentum and just subtract it from the experiment and say it didn't happen. They're basically saying that they're just taking the 66 extra, and they're just saying it didn't happen because 33 went this way and 33 went that way. So any experiment where I make something go this way and I make something go that way, I can say those things aren't real energy in the universe. I mean, it's just absolute nonsense. It's so stupid. All right. I've made a theoretical slide of Stephen's experiment with 31 runs. Yes, so he's so proud of his slides. Oh, hilarious. Okay, springs store energy, not momentum. So there's just, who's got evidence of this? So where did you prove this? Even though springs show that they store weight, which is obviously momentum. I mean, you can just say that it's basically the same thing. Weight and momentum are the same thing. So exactly how is there any evidence that springs don't store weight, don't show you it overtly, and that is momentum. So that we'll get to. We'll play an Action Lab video posted by, you know, the Virgo asshole. But anyway, just disgusting. Oh, and look at this. So we only have 1 sentence from the Brozo. Brilliantly succinct point, John. So exactly how is it brilliantly succinct? So, you know, this is where you just say, gee, you can't lie enough about these people because they're such liars. I mean, how, you know, Brozo knows I didn't say half the energy goes into the object. He knows I've said, yes, you know, something less than half has to go into it. Clearly. Very much appreciated for hammering that nail home. There's no nail here. It's just an insane, stupid premise, okay? That it's not a straw man. It's a fake, facade, phony man argument. They're just taking an argument I didn't make, okay? And it's clearly, they're claiming it's some sort of direct quote. My direct quote is, at best. That's my direct quote. Thank you for making this slide, John. So just amazing. You know, this horse shit. From Godfrey, your so-called numbers and data and math have no power here. So this is his satire, I guess. Squiggles on whiteboards. There's no math in this fucking video. What the fuck is he talking about? There's drawings of the experiment. Our only legitimate form of experiment. So again, where did I ever argue that? But I said they're very helpful, and he just used one essentially. Now I didn't use it to draw the experiment and explain to us exactly how that way undoes that way in the real world, that works somewhere. Show me where it works. Okay. Oh, now he's going to quote from the Bible. By the word of the Lord the heavens were made. So that's exactly what you're doing. Okay, is basically quoting Leibniz, which is the same thing as quoting the Bible. You know, but anyway, in just the same way, by the struggles of Gary physics is made. So is this somewhere on the subject? No. Is it useful? No. This is just such crap from a known wife beater. I mean, he's full for it. He belongs to the "she made me do it" club. Okay, he's a great believer in "she made me do it." All right, so your numbers game is basically blasphemy. Whatever. Where was the numbers? What number game did he play except misquoting me? So besides misquoting me, when I said it at least hundreds of times, the best you could do is twice the velocity if you got all the energy in, which you can't do, which I'm sure I said in hundreds of videos. Nowhere in my drawings did I show it not bouncing back and not acknowledging that it reflects with some portion of the energy. It's in the fucking high school video that I endorse as being accurate. Okay, showing the real, okay, experiment done without any shenanigans. And basically those numbers come out exactly as I would predict. Alright. Oh, just disgusting. Also, make sure to set the quality to HD, otherwise the text is too vague. Well, fuck you in the ass until dead. I don't have to play any of your stupid games. You can't make a reasonable video. Okay, that's your bad, not my problem. Especially for Gary. Fuck you in the ass. I don't HD anybody. Fuck you. Why the fuck would I do it for some piece of scum like you who's a lying sack of shit? Yeah, fuck you. The only proper way to look at your vomit is with your eyes well squinted. You fucking piece of shit. Alright. Is it that Gary can't read properly? Well, apparently you people can't listen properly, because you're not going to find the video where I said it has to go twice the speed and it can't go any other, and no, there's no reflection. So you're not going to find the video where I drew that. You're not going to find any point where you can say that was my argument, that the experiment comes out that way, that there's no reflected energy. I've made a point over and over again, hundreds of times, literally hundreds of times, that the whole failure of the Newton's cradle is that it doesn't allow you to do conversions between different masses, and that's unfortunate. That you can't convert energy purely between different masses unless you use a lever or a spring. It's that he can't read. So again, these assholes can't listen. Or think, so that's a brozo thing. Or talk, yeah, whatever. What you people can't do is muster the tiny bit of character required to not be grotesquely dishonest. I mean, it doesn't take much not to be grotesquely dishonest to the argument. And all this was a slander. This was fucking slander all over the fucking goddamn place. These are not things I said. It's not accurate. It's just a big fat fucking lie. Endorsed by you, who are supposed to be preserving the truth. You're supposed to be protecting the truth for the evil enemies of the truth, and you have to lie to do it. Now, isn't that really proving who's the criminal here? Yes, I think it does prove who's the criminal. He won't play my fucking video. He won't show me explaining how the fucking free energy machine would work. And again, I can use hydraulics instead of the lever. If you don't like levers and you're going to claim levers don't work, make it a hydraulic system. Okay, you hit the 2 cylinders on the top, and then 1 cylinder moves at the bottom at twice the speed. And you just keep going and going and going, making free energy. You fucking liar. Alright, he had another video, but I don't know if I'm going to bother with it now. Oh, it's really irritating. You have to do this latest thing. What does the negative momentum mean? A couple of explanations from. So he'll probably Quora again. So he doesn't even go to chat GDP or GPT or whatever the fuck it is. And no, instead he goes to Quora. Ugh, fuck. Alright, so let's do the Action Lab one. And also interesting subjects and such. It's not interesting. It's just the fact that the Virgo guy believes that because I say you have to conserve momentum, and the momentum is energy, that somehow that means I'm saying you can lift yourself up, which I never said that. But the simple truth is things in space have to, they have to basically give away energy. They have to give away a direction. So I've drawn this so many times, and it's just, there's no way they're going to prove this isn't how it works. They're just going to keep claiming, that they don't have to accept there are alternative theories that work just as well as their nonsense. And it's just very unfair. Alright, so let's do this. Alright, so I have argued that look, if NASA knows this, and if you're going to do any real work in the world, you kind of have to see it, understand what you're really doing. And so in every circumstance, you're in basically a container, the universe, and there's energy going in all directions. And so the truth is that at any one moment, there's just as much stuff inside of you going this way as there is that way. That is, there's stuff leaving your body and there's stuff going back into your body all the time. You could call it Brownian motion, but it's really happening on the level of electrons and protons, and that was one of Einstein's, legitimate, valuable insights. Is that basically the Brownian motion is just a consequence of the motion of electrons and protons, and well, anyway. So this is the nature of energy of any system. So if something's at equilibrium, that is, it's not noticeably doing anything, it means it has the same ratio that you have of things going this way and things going that way. And for the sake of the argument, we'll just say it's 50-50, But for every object it's in space, it's got some sort of biases built into it. We can assume it's not standing still in the absolute universe, but it doesn't really matter for the argument to be made. And all you're really doing at any one time is taking the energy that you contain and directing it in one direction, that is, allowing it to leave in one direction. So this could bounce off of this wall, and say if I put a hole here, it could fly out the hole. Now all it is a piece of energy going this way, so I just let a piece of energy leave that way. And once I've done that, the whole system is now lost a hit against this wall. It didn't happen. This thing didn't hit this wall pushing it this way. So it's minus that, which means it's got an imbalance now. It's not 50-50, it's 50-49. So now it's got an imbalance in this direction, and something will hit this wall. Okay, the stuff that was already here, heading for the wall, there's no hole, it's going to hit. That means this is going to move this way because, it's got an imbalance now. And that's basically how you move, is to just release energy in these directions. And that's all you can do. And it's the releasing of the energy, the losing of it, okay? You give it away. There's no counter force that pushes you this way. You gave away that way, the balance, and now you're imbalanced. And it's that simple. You gave away the balance, you're imbalanced. You give away motion or mechanism in a direction, you're not going to have it. Because you gave it away. You give away $10, there's not a $10 taking ferry that comes up to you and takes your $10. You gave it away. It's that simple. Alright, so in that context, let's play this fucking piece of shit video that he thinks in some way does something other than prove every point I've made. Okay, which it does, basically. But, I mean, it is just baby talk. I haven't watched the complete video yet. So, yes, later on in the video, the second half of it, he might get serious about something. But in the first half, it's just ridiculous antics, so we'll go really fast because it's really just ridiculous antics.
Possible to actually pick yourself up. So this question is so stupid that it's actually interesting. Have you ever thought about it?
No.
We talking about cash backing. Not a game.
We talking about cash back.
We talking about...
You're not talking about practice?
No, cash backing.
Word. We talking about cash back.
Yeah.
Cash back.
Cash backing.
Idiocracy
Cash back
is
like a
on the
pro.
move.
With Chase Freedom Unlimited. How do you cash back?
Yeah, I get free money for my credit
Every
card.
time you feed your pet Hills,
money,
you
lots of
help
free
feed
money.
a shelter pet, which helps make them healthy, happy, and more
The company
adoptable,
likes to give me
changing
all my
their
money
life
back.
forever, so they can change yours. Science did that.
So look at all this. I mean,
Why is it so
fucking
impossible to
really
just lift
long.
yourself up? Why can't you do it? So for example, I'm sitting in this chair here. Now let me try to pick myself up.
So what you could do is fart. Okay, so if you fart really hard, I mean super farting, maybe that'll work. Okay, because you're letting something leave your body. Okay, you know, you could twist your head off and throw it down against the floor. That might help. Okay, it might lift you up a little tiny bit. I mean, all you're doing is playing with the force of gravity. The force of gravity is the thing pushing you in. You have to come up with some way of getting rid of that, you know, and that's difficult to do. You have to overcome it by throwing away something that's more momentum than what gravity's caused the rest of you to have.
Heavier than I thought.
Speed it up even more.
So why can't I pick myself up? I mean, I don't weigh that much, so I should be strong enough to lift somebody my size. So let me get a scale and see how much I actually weigh as I'm picking myself up. Okay, so you can see I weigh around 160 pounds now.
So he's not really picking himself up by pulling down on the scale, right? Does that make much sense? No. So that's really retarded. If you took your hands and pushed on the scale, that might be some hope of you trying to push yourself. I don't even know how, you know, but pulling on the scale? Yeah, of course, that's just going to make you weigh more because now you're putting more pressure on the scale by springing your body.
But let me try to pick myself up on this chair. So I grab the chair and start to lift. Notice how right when I start to lift, it goes to 180 pounds. So now I suddenly weigh 180 pounds.
Yeah, well, you really don't weigh 180 pounds, and your mass isn't 180, atomic units. So, because you're obviously created a mechanism where you're compressing, okay, a non-compressible substance.
Now 200, 220, 240, 280, 300 pounds. Oh, 320, 340. So, I definitely can't pick up a 340-pound person. So it seems that the harder I try to lift myself up, the more I weigh. Well, that's because I was on a chair, right? So I was trying to pick up the chair, and in picking up the chair, I made myself weigh more. And the more I weighed, the more I had to pick up, and the more I had to pick up, it made me weigh.
No, there was no more weight here. There was just obviously a spring, and you're just saying, well, how are you applying pressure to the spring? Well, you're using the muscles in your arm to apply more pressure to the spring. But there was no, you weighed more. Gravity didn't make you weigh more. It wasn't about your center of mass. It didn't have anything to do with weight in the traditional sense of gravitationally created weight. It just had to do with the fact that you created pressure by applying your muscular function. And this example will likewise be incorrect.
Way more. So now let's see if I can pick myself up just standing here. So to start off, I'm going to start off by trying to pick up one leg. So if I kept my weight evenly distributed, I'd be trying to pick up around 80 pounds. But that's not what happens. As soon as I pick up this leg,
yes, because you all know it's gravity and it's contact, and so that's not going to work. So yes, this is where, yes, just be an imbecile. Okay, for what purpose? I don't know. Obviously that doesn't work. We all know that your pressure you're applying to the scale is being caused by your gravitational weight, so all of your mass has weight, and it doesn't matter how many, if you had 10 legs or one leg, it doesn't matter. You're still going to be, all of the weight has to be grounded through that one conductor. All of the wattage has to go through the one conductor.
now suddenly I can see that this leg doesn't only weigh 80 pounds now. Now suddenly it's still supporting 160 pounds. So now if I want to pick up this leg, I don't just have to pick up only 80 pounds, but I have to pick up a 160 pound leg. So let's say instead of picking up the whole leg, I'm just going to pick up the back of my foot. But now as I pick up the back of my foot, I still weigh 160 pounds. And all of that weight was just distributed on the front of my foot. So now this tiny little area still weighs 160 pounds. Have you ever tried to pick up something that's that big that weighs 160 pounds? But now the more that leaves the ground, the more...
What would the difference be? Yeah, so I mean, yeah, people pick up barbells all the time, all that kind of stuff. How is picking it up, you know, anything other than gripping it with your hands? Yeah, I could just put a hook on it and then it's easy to pick up. No harder than any other form. I mean, it's hard to pick up a big thing that weighs a lot because there's no way to get to its center of mass and all that stuff. It's easy to find the center of mass of a small object.
more weight is on a smaller area, and so no matter what I do, I try to pick up more, and the more that little piece that's still on the ground weighs per area. And so in trying to pick myself up, all I was able to do is concentrate the whole weight of my body to a smaller and smaller area. So no surprises here now. I wasn't able to pick myself up off the chair, and I wasn't able to pick myself up off of the floor. Well, then how come I can do this? So somehow both of the things that I just mentioned in both of these methods of trying to pick myself up suddenly didn't apply when I jumped. I'm leaving the ground. But you may think, that's stupid, you're jumping. But so what? Why is jumping different? How does jumping make you suddenly just lift off the ground? Well, let's look at the scale.
Well, it doesn't suddenly make you lift off the ground, but whatever, it just has to do with the same principle. You're giving away energy in one direction to overcome gravity.
And see what's happening when we're jumping. Okay, so back on the scale, you can see I weigh 160 pounds. But what's interesting is that I don't always weigh 160 pounds. So the thing to notice here is that when I move down, I weigh less. So notice right when I start to accelerate downwards, my weight goes really far down. But then when I stop myself, then my weight goes up.
So when you negate gravity having contact, that is, you're going faster than gravity is pushing you, then that part of your body can't weigh anything because it's in basically free fall. So you're allowing some portion of your body to be in free fall. Therefore, yes, you can't be putting weight on the scale because you've negated the gravitational pressure by going faster than gravity.
So you can see that I can change my weight on the scale just by moving where the center of mass of my body is. So the real reason that I left the ground when I jumped is not because I was lifting myself up, but because the ground pushed me off the ground. Let me show you what I mean. So I normally weigh 160 pounds, but watch what happens when I jump. Look at.
All right, so the idea that the earth pushes you back, okay, that's a fact. So it's always pushing you back, okay, from your gravitational mass. And all you're saying is you can subtract from your gravitational mass by moving faster than gravity, or you can add to it by continuing to stay in the gravity, that is, opposing it. Moving in the opposite direction of the gravity will make you weigh more for a short period of time that you're moving away from the gravity. It's multiplying, it's taking the amount of time you were in the gravity and extending it, essentially.
The weight. So suddenly the scale pushed on me with 320 pounds force, and that's way more than I weigh, and so that caused me to accelerate upwards.
Yeah, not really, but whatever.
So I weigh 160 pounds, but the scale's pushing up on me with 320 pounds, so that caused me to go flying up in the air.
It really wasn't the pressure of the scale pushing, it was the negation of the gravity by you moving your legs up. Okay, but whatever.
So you can see that jumping isn't really levitating, because what happened there is you pushed down on the ground with a greater force than your body weighs, and that caused the ground to push on you with that great force, greater than what you weigh, and so that causes you to pop up in the air.
But obviously that acceleration would have to be instantaneous then. I mean, really instantaneous, and that's a bit of a reach, right? That the gravity somehow, without moving you any accelerating distance, you just instantly went from not moving to moving. And it's not likely. But anyway, continuing.
But you don't always leave the ground when you push on the ground harder than you weigh. If that were the case, then you'd always be popping off of the ground whenever you took a step or changed anything about your center of mass.
So this is important, okay. So the idea is that, as I've pointed out, the fact is gravity is pushing you into the ground's pushing you back. It's just that you can't see any of it, okay, because the jiggle is happening, number one, fast, and to different parts of you at different times. And your body is absorbing all of that and looking like it's not doing anything. But it is. And he makes the point, sort of, if we could make everything really, really solid, extremely solid, then you could see that effect. Because it wouldn't be absorbed by your body. The irregularities wouldn't be neutralized into nothing.
If I just went down a little bit and then moved up, I'd pop off the ground. And the reason I don't leave the ground whenever it goes above my weight is because I'm not a rigid body. If I were perfectly rigid, then I would pop off the ground whenever I pushed on the ground more than I weighed. But I'm non-rigid, which means my body can deform slightly. I can stretch out my toes to stay on the ground, even though the weight is pushing me off the ground more than I weigh. But is it actually possible to leave the ground?
It's actually all of your other body parts that are doing that. Again, parts of you are moving one way, parts of you are moving the other way all the time. So you're not going to fly off the surface, because the fact is that at any one moment, some part of you is being affected by the ground pushing up. And another part of you is being affected by gravity pushing you down, and so the two directions are opposite.
Ground without pushing down with more weight than you weigh? Well, the answer is yes, but it's a little bit harder. Let me show you how to do it. So basically what you need to do in this case is to be able to just lift your legs up and not jump. And it's really hard to get yourself to do it. So you're just standing there and you're just gonna suddenly pull up.
Yeah, so all you're doing is removing your connection to the ground. So the ground can't push you back up, and so you're just going to fall naturally from gravity. So you're not going up. So a center of mass will just fall. So it would be stupid to say, I made myself go higher, because you didn't do that. That's just like saying, well, if I knock your head off, you're not as tall. You know, I mean, it's really ridiculous. So his actual mass doesn't go up, it goes down. Okay, so his center of mass drops. So this is useless mush.
Your legs. And of course, as soon as you pull up your legs, your body's gonna start falling. But the goal is to try to let your feet leave the ground without increasing your weight. Okay, let's see if I can do this. So you can see that my feet actually left the ground without increasing the weight on the scale. So that means that I didn't jump. So I was able to leave the ground without jumping. And the way that was able to happen is basically my body pulled my legs up as it was falling. So,
but again, he didn't leave the ground, right? All he did was avert hitting it. So, you know, you can hit the ground pointed this way, and then at the last minute you can try to turn your body this way and you'll hit the ground a little bit later. That's just not accomplishing anything.
really, that's just a creative way of falling. So technically, I was able to actually pick myself up off the ground. But the problem is, my body that was picking myself up was actually...
All right, so obviously he didn't pick himself up. Up is the wrong word to use because you fell down. You didn't fall up. So it's just, you know, this is just word game bullshit. You didn't go anywhere near doing up. You did down creatively.
Falling in the meantime. Another way you could levitate or lift yourself up off the ground is to throw mass the opposite way. So if you had a bunch of mass and you were to suddenly throw it downward.
So this is the physics. So this is just NASA basic physics. There won't be any mention of any kinetic energy here. It's just mass moving a velocity. Okay, and that's all it is. You know, and he's not going to say anything about how, well, if you move it faster, you can quadruple the effect, and in fact, you can quadruple it, and you can end up with making all kinds of free energy.
You would move upward. In fact, if you were to keep doing that, you would continue to move upward. So if you were able to throw enough stuff downward, then you would continue to move upward.
Why are there 2 extra seats? I know, Uncle Dan and his...
Yeah, they're all, these aren't skip ad kind of ads. Really nasty. Guy is such a whore for money. He's got like 4 channels. Yeah, probably makes $1 million. And he's got to do this. Yuck.
You could just use air. So if you were able to grab the air and throw it down and keep grabbing the air and throw it down, you could move upward. In fact, that's exactly how drones, helicopters...
Well, that's how birds work, fucker. I mean, shit, it's kind of obvious, right? They're the ones really doing the down thing, you know. Turn your sail this way, then turn your sail that way, push down with the sail, turn your sail in, put your sail down, push down with the sail. I mean, they're making it kind of obvious that they're pushing a lot of air down.
And planes fly, is they're continually grabbing the air and throwing it downward, and that pushes them upward. And I showed this in a previous video where you can see the weight of the scale stays the same when a drone hovers above it because it's throwing its equivalent weight of air downward. And that's also the same way that rockets work, except rockets don't grab the air around them and throw it down. But what they do is grab the gas that's inside of their rocket booster, and they throw that gas downward really fast.
Right, so all they're doing is letting stuff go this way from any, you know, and they're converting an explosion. And the explosion's going in all directions. And they're attempting with the nozzles and all that crap to take the explosive energy and force it all into go in the same direction. And that also maximizes how much they keep the linearity of the explosion. So they're just trying to take heat that's going in all directions, and they're trying to make it go in just one direction. And by making it go in one direction, they can go in the other direction because they're technically just letting go of energy going one way. And obviously, as they let go of the energy going this way, they're going to go that way. The rocket's giving energy away. It's giving mass and velocity away in a direction. Means it has inside of it non-equilibrium.
And the harder they throw it, the faster it'll push them upward. And so that's why planes and drones and helicopters need air, because they have to grab that air around them.
So it's really not pushing, right? So again, if I give away something, yeah, it's not the same. You don't say I needed to push off somebody else with my $10 bill. But the fact is I give it away, I change my condition. And my condition is now going to have a bias that's minus the direction I gave away. It's plus minus the direction I gave away.
And throw it down, but rockets don't need air to push off of. They just use their own internal gas and throw it away that way, and it pushes them the other way. What we're really looking for here in order to pick yourself up is some anti-gravity.
So it is a little more complicated than just using the gas pressure. They're using the gas under pressure and then igniting it so it also expands, which creates even much more energy. If they just shot the gas out, they wouldn't go very far. They needed to ignite in the nozzle to really create the differential
technology. And by anti-gravity, I don't just mean like electrostatic repulsion or magnetic repulsion or buoyancy. I mean actually anti-gravity. Is that even possible? So because in the theory of general relativity...
All right, so this is really stupid. So I would obviously argue it's possible if you have an infinite amount of energy. So yeah, I'm just saying all you're doing is countering a force. So you just figure out how much the force is applying and then you counter the force. Yeah. So yeah, we made elevators. We figured out how to counter the force. But there's no anti-gravity except through creating energy in the opposite direction, using energy in the opposite direction, putting it back, giving back the $10 bill.
Gravity isn't actually a force, but it's actually just the bending of space-time. And so
all right, so again, he's going to use the typical two-dimensional silly drawing that has nothing to do with reality, okay? Because if he draws it the real way, it's going to look really stupid. It's going to look like a vacuum cleaner.
Basically, gravity is kind of this well that forms when there's a mass there. So
obviously this well only works in, if you're using gravity to understand it's pushing the object down in the well. So it doesn't do anything to illustrate the reality, and obviously gravity is in all directions, not two directions. It just, two dimensions.
In order to have something that is anti-gravity, that means that instead of a well when there's a mass there, we'd have to have something that bent it the opposite way. So if a mass bends space-time like that, then we need something that's kind of the opposite of the mass. How about something called...
So why the fuck, again, this, he should have at least said when he posted the link to this video, he should have said something like, oh yeah, well, don't watch after, 9 minutes or whatever, because, yeah, well, that sure is a pile of crap.
A negative mass.
Negative mass, whatever. Negative energy, negative mass. You really go along with all this crap. They can just say any kind of silly crap and you'll go along with it.
An entire video before dedicated to what a negative mass means.
Oh, brother. Yeah, it means you're fucking stupid. That's what it means.
A negative mass is purely theoretical at this point.
Yeah, no, it's purely made up crap that has not been tested in any kind of rational way how the universe could possibly work that way.
But we're not quite sure if it exists or not.
Oh, we're not quite sure. No reason to believe. No good reason. Not a single bit of evidence indicating there's any reason to believe there's any such thing as a negative mass. And yet we're not sure. We made it up. It's a fairy story. It's a Bugs Bunny, and we're not sure that it's a cartoon character that it's made up. When we just made it up. We just drew Bugs Bunny, and now they're saying we're not sure if he's real. Yeah, it's a drawing. That's right. Yeah, it's just a drawing. We're not sure if he's real or not.
If it does exist, then it means it would bend space-time the opposite way like this. Which means that it would repel, it would cause you to float. So the only way to produce anti-gravity is to have something that has a negative mass. Now because mass and energy are equivalent according to this equation, that means that negative mass means there can also...
So that's more crap, okay? Obviously mass and energy are not equivalent, so it's just so stupid. But the fact is, for force to have its essence realized, it has to interact with matter. Force doesn't mean anything on its own. It has to hit a piece of matter. So force can only be seen in the universe by hitting matter. It can only have a realness by interacting with matter. It's not real, in a sense, until it interacts with matter, in the sense that it's not sensible.
also be negative energy. So the only way to have anti-gravity is to have some large body of negative mass.
All right, that's really easy to make.
And you be a positive mass on that negative mass. So you would accelerate away from this negative mass.
And by some weirdo conclusion, he's stating that somehow the negative mass will follow you because somehow the negative mass wants to fall into the gravity well. Why would it want to do that?
Whereas actually this negative mass would be attracted to you and pull upward. And that's because...
Well, I guess if it's going to pull upward, it's going to do it at twice the rate of gravity, so it's going to pull upward faster than I can move away from it. So I'm going to be consumed by it. or something like that, right? I mean, if I have an upslope and we're saying that somehow that attracts to a downslope, wouldn't the inverse be true too? So wouldn't we just measure the length of the slope, and the slope has gotten twice as long? You know, I've made twice as big a wave, and so therefore it should be attracting at twice the rate of gravity. So even though I'm flying away, I will be consumed.
The gravitational force is repulsive, so the negative mass responds by accelerating in the opposite direction of the force. The concept of negative mass is actually really interesting. What happens if you have two massive bodies, one positive mass, one negative mass? They actually end up chasing each other. One flies one way and the other one chases it, continually accelerating faster and faster, while the net energy is actually zero. So I'll put a link in my description to this YouTube video that somebody made showing the different effects when you have
Things
positive...
are going faster and faster, but there's no energy involved. This is their physics. Shit.
mass and negative mass and what happens and how they can actually be stably orbiting each other. It's a really interesting video.
No, it isn't. God, it's just so stupid. Was the entire universe made just for us? I want to see that. No, I don't. Why does the dunking bird speed up in a vacuum? I don't know how those two are related to what he just said. So he just said shit, and these are the videos he has for clicking on. Okay, so obviously not much continuity there.
Everyone, thanks for watching another episode of the Action Lab. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, remember to hit the subscribe button.
Yeah, fuck you in the ass until dead and such. Alright. Ugh, gross. So, I don't know if is there a reason to look at the comments? 3,000 of them. Lifting yourself up is the most budget way to open a black hole. Albert Einstein. So Einstein didn't really believe in black holes, and so he's making a joke about it. Yeah, go fuck yourself. Yeah, that's what he's saying. Too stupid. Alright. I have a watch that tells me the time. Okay, I don't know. What the fuck? Short answer, you need infinite strength to lift yourself. Is that some sort of God bullshit? Oh, shit. If you're getting infinitely heavy, I don't know how getting infinitely strong is going to help you any, but whatever. This is what these morons waste their time on. So some fuck posted a link to this stupid derivation of the why there's an m squared, and he does inches cubed, and Ford, whatever that is. And it's only Ford in really specific engineering examples, you know, where you're basically saying there's 4 units, so it really doesn't have to do with any kind of it's a unit thing. Okay, you're basically saying there's 4 objects, so it's really, and they're all doing the same thing, so collectively it's a, you know, you might as well just multiply it by 4, but it's really not, it's not 4 like 2 squares. Anyway, so that one we can just ignore, and again, and so the explanation here is just per second crap again. Let's divide by an unnecessary second that you should just be crossing out. So I don't really want to do this math crap, but we'll move a little bit ahead. Oh, I can't move ahead till the video plays. Then I have to play the fucking ass. It's just such a poor quality video.
Or divided into.
It's got a bunch of family making all kinds of fucking noises in the background. It's just crap. So it's really when you just get to some point here where, yes, see, it's 2 over 1. And so now that creates another fake unit. Yeah, it's 2 over 1, not 1 second. Okay, it's not the same second. You can't do that. You're not squaring the same second then. You're just creating an arbitrary extra second. So if you just put real numbers into the equation here, you won't have this problem, because there won't be any need to put a 1 down here. So you don't need to do the invert and multiply thing. You don't need to do any of that bullshit. So you don't need this redundant second, but you basically just cross them out, because you already have the answer. Once you have this number here, you're done. That's the number. You want to know 60 miles an hour, and then you want to know how many seconds it went 60 miles an hour, and that's all you want. There's nothing else to the equation. You're saying, okay, I find the rate that I'm going, the rate that I accelerate, 30 miles an hour. Same as my velocity, by the way. Okay, my acceleration was 30. I started at 0. My velocity is now 30 miles an hour, you could say, and that was my acceleration. And all I'm going to do is multiply it by the number of seconds. I'm not going to do any second squared thing. So again, it's just contrivance. Very uninteresting contrivance. Alright, so I did plan on doing the relativity argument today, but now I'm already tired, so I don't want to. But we'll see. Maybe we'll play this bar. It's only 21 seconds. What does negative momentum mean? A couple of explanations from Quora. Alright, having a negative momentum means that an object is traveling, so you can't just post links to this crap, in the opposite direction of what has been chosen as the positive direction. So again, I can just do any experiment, like cue balls, billiard balls, I can just, anything where I change momentum going this way and I change it into two momentums going sideways. Then I can just say those things subtract, and it's zero momentum, and I didn't have to use any of my energy to make them move. That's his theory, which I'm going to call stupid. It's a stupid theory. Okay, your theory of negative energy is stupid. Okay, this is usually indicated by a negative sign in front of the momentum's numerical value. The magnitude of the negative momentum will be equal to the product of the object's masses and its velocities. Duh. Which will also be negative. So I can actually have a negative momentum. I can have negative, I can create negative energy. Yeah. By, putting, if I'm going to hit two things, I could hit one of them more than the other one, and then I'll end up with negative energy. Alright, this means that although the object is continuing to move in what has been chosen as the negative direction, it is losing velocity from one moment to another. So, does it make any sense? No. Is this complete crap? Yes. Is there any reason? Oh, well, this, yeah, that's clever. That's really clever. What a fucking asshole. Bruce Murray. So I don't know why he figured that he would take this guy's comment and post it, but whatever. I'm not disagreeing with other responses, but I felt one thing is left out here should be mentioned. Momentum is a vector quantity, right by slanderous label, frankly. There is no rational reason to think kinetic energy is any less of a vector than momentum. Alright, I mean, a train's rolling down the track, you can calculate its momentum, you know exactly what direction it's going. It's rolling down the same track, you're going to calculate its kinetic energy, and you're going to pretend it isn't exactly in the same direction. I mean, it's just baby talk. Oh, it's a magical scalar. It's silly. Just fucking silly contrivance. Alright, and the sign just gives direction. You may have been trying to ask, can momentum have a negative magnitude? There is a simple answer to that. No. I mean, except yes, because you believe it. The magnitude of your momentum is positive, definite. Only because if you choose the right direction, if you choose the wrong direction, then it's negative. So that's just, so if you just make the rule, well, you always have to choose the higher number is the positive. If you don't do that, well, then yeah, there's negative momentum. You have to have a negative mass to have negative momentum magnitude, which is non-physical. So again, that's just a lie. Just depends on, it's completely arbitrary. You can just pick the negative side that has more momentum, and then you have definitely created an energy. Whatever, anti-energy. Whatever the right jargon is for your magical bullshit theory. Oh, this is pathetic. Well, not terribly readable. Okay, depending on which coordinate system you choose, okay, let's just say that's just a waste of time. The result can have a negative number or several negative numbers. However, the choice of coordinate system is arbitrary. Yeah, somehow we're going to change what something is by changing the position from which we look at it. So the elephant isn't the elephant. The elephant is a completely different organism depending on from where I look at it. You could flip the axis around, get positive numbers, but it wouldn't change anything in the physical system itself. Well, you just say so. Well, in physics, momentum is a vector quantity. It says we, with our heads up our asses. Okay, so you somehow have to specify the direction of the momentum, and if you don't choose the right way, then you'll end up with negative momentum. If you only have two directions available, then you could use a number line and let positive momentum, negative momentum designate the direction, whatever that means. That's the only thing I can think of. An object can't really have less momentum than stopped. Oh, it can't, except in your math it can. So again, in the Professor Lewin experiment, I just make this way negative and that way positive, and bingo, I have made lots of negative momentum. You know, lots and lots. I have a lot more negative momentum than positive momentum. Yeah, I mean, this is such crap. Ugh, insufferable crap. Alright, so let's see, we don't really have anything here comment-wise, right? I mean, who cares what this Walker kook says? When a spring is dropped on a rigid surface like an anvil, for example, the spring is first compressed, okay, and the anvil absorbs the momentum of the spring. Well, it's obviously not absorbing all of the momentum because, frankly, the spring is collapsing and yielding. You can't feel a weight where it's not allowing its weight to be felt. But now the spring will try to relax again. Well, you call it relaxing. Maybe the spring calls it something else. And it pushes against the anvil to jump back up, whereby the anvil absorbs a second portion of momentum. So no evidence that the anvil actually absorbs anything. Okay. The spring has now the same amount of momentum, but in the opposite direction. Yeah, the fact is that all the energy did was U-turn in the anvil. If the anvil was made out of confetti, something, styrofoam, obviously the anvil would move. It would yield, and it wouldn't absorb any energy, and it wouldn't give back any energy. It would move. Okay. While the anvil now has twice the amount of momentum of the spring, but the same direction as the spring went before the, says this moron. He just spouts these pieces of crap that he has no evidence for. Alright. So, that wasn't terribly enlightening. Alright, let's just check to see if old Brozo made any video. Ladies first, ladies first. That was just so fucking irritating. And the stupid Gosling lying sack of shit. Nothing there also. Okay, good enough. So we've done our job there. So I guess we can just get rid of this. And we can put this back on and see if there's any chatters. And then maybe I'll do the relativity argument. I really have to have my brain on. Yeah, well, it's not about how things sound, but yes, sounding silly is an indication that you should pay attention and see if it is actually silly. That's what a responsible human would do. Starts to sound silly, you investigate and see, yeah, maybe that silly thing is real. Maybe we ought to see about that. Some reason my electricity isn't working here. That's very bad for me. Don't really understand what the problem is. Broken. Okay, that's the problem. It's broken. Ugh. I have to go down here and figure out why my battery has got no battery in it. Jeez. Life. Such a pain in the ass. Stop that. Everything's just irritating. Alright, so I guess I'll do the relativity argument, but I really don't feel like it. I was hoping there'd be some chat so I could change the subject for a little tiny bit of time. But apparently there's not going to be any of that. It's got enough voltage. It should be working. What is the hang up here? Shit. Really annoying. Okay. I should have a backup battery, but I don't. At the current time. Alright, I guess I have to see if this, maybe this one's fried. It really shouldn't. It's only 4 days old. It's always something. Alright, so let's see, we did the free momentum experiment. And that does, you know, say they're all a little bit related anyway, so at least that's good. And the idea of lifting yourself, well, what's the real nature of energy, is direction. Okay, that one's dead too. It really shouldn't be a problem. Sorry about this, but this is irritating. I really should have. Yeah, I have to put this other stupid light on because I can't see down there. Yeah. Nicotine crisis. No. Alright, so let's just start with some new wires. Maybe that's the problem. Do you use a battery to smoke or a disposable pen? Yeah, I just use the tips and I just make my own electricity. I use my solar panels to recharge my batteries, and so at least I'm yeah, so yeah. Ugh. At least I'm not paying for the electricity to smoke, but whatever. It's a tiny difference. Fairly tiny, anyway. Alright, let's see. New wires. Still not working. Well, yeah, that's not good. Nothing. That is really weird. I have to say, there's no reason for these batteries not to be recharging. So yeah, I have old lithium batteries that I took out of crap I bought for dirt cheap that was broken. So I have a bunch of these flat lithium battery packs, and the trick is the wires are a little shitty and you have to fiddle with them. Anyway, just the fact is I just don't have, I don't take the time to do things right, and I really should. Yeah, this one's dead too. So, yeah, and what you need is, you do need the amperage. So it won't work without enough amps. So you have to have your 3.7 volts, but you need your 3.7 volts at sufficient amperage or you don't get anywhere. So I would like to just use an adapter or something, but most adapters don't produce the, the 2 amps or more that you need. Still failing. Very strange. I have to concede I don't really understand that. The battery really should be recharging. Really no excuse for it to be failing to do that. Must be some wire disconnected somewhere. Alright. Well, it's just a darn problem here today. So I should have had a backup battery. Yeah, this is just going to irritate me, so I really have to fix it. Yeah, that's nothing. I don't get it. Connected to the computer, Gary. Yeah, that's what I'll do. I'll connect it to the computer. See if that works. Recharge it off the USB. So where was I? Sorry. Yeah, bad video performance, I'll concede. I should, taking care of my medication issues ahead of time. These are also shitty wires. I really have to use a better quality wire. It's just making it more work than it needs to be. Well, obviously, if it's not charging, the longer I charge it, isn't going to make any difference. So, sorry, don't want to be insulting, but yeah, that's the whole issue. It's not charging. Not that it's not long enough, it's not charging at all. So maybe the battery's dead, and I have to make a new one. Which, yeah, I should take the time to go do that. Yeah, well, look, there really isn't any comments on these subjects, so maybe I'll do the relativity argument the next time. Maybe I'll do that. Alright. We'll just call this enough of a video. I think that's what we'll do. Maybe. Give you a couple more minutes and see if anybody has anything on the subject of free momentum. There probably are separate subjects. Whether there's absolute momentum or whether there's free momentum. So first you have to argue against free momentum. There's no clog up. I mean, it obviously fires or it doesn't fire. It's, atomizers are, it's a coil of wire. It either gets hot or it doesn't get hot. There's no, in-betweens. Alright, that looks good. Let's see, maybe it was just a bad piece of wire. I don't know. We'll see. I don't think it's going to work, but we'll see. And I am correct. It is still not charging. So, charger has failed to do the charging thing. Somewhere there's a bad wire I have to fix, I guess. Could be the only conclusion. I think that's reasonable. And such. So forth and whatnot. I could try this other battery, but this one never works. Rarely is efficiently efficient. It doesn't have a charge either. Nope, not a nothing. Alright, anyway. Too many neutrinos being absorbed. Let's see. Anti-electrons aren't hitting the coil, that's why. Oh, okay. Whatever. It's a funny joke, I suppose, but yeah, I don't really have any funny bones left. All my funny bones got dissolved. And I just couldn't care less about funny anymore. Unless I'm being funny. Alright, did notice something. I believe the polarity was reversed. Yeah, so I probably fried the recharger. Yes. I have such a brilliant system, you know. The red wire has to connect to the black wire in this case. You know, so somehow, I don't know how I could make that mistake where I did the opposite for some reason. But anyway, it appears that's what the cause was. That you can't recharge a battery by reversing the polarity. So there we go. We'll see if the charger's fried, then I have to make a new charger. It's always something. Means I have to solder. I don't want to solder. Oh, look at that. Now my other chargers, boy, if I would have done that, reversed the polarity, would have just, you know, gone up in smoke. But these little ones, I bought these like 5 to 10 years ago. These little, can't show you, but it's just this little device you use, like it had a little tiny battery in it, so if you wanted your phone, like you're on a phone call and you need a little of that battery backup, you could store a little bit in this little tiny battery backup. And they were like giving them away. I guess nobody was buying them because it was some newer, better version or something, so I got like 20 of them for $3. And yeah, they actually have protection against reverse polarity, you know, which is really nice. Ah, life is so much better with my nicotine. Let's see, which one was I using? This one, okay. Alright, yeah, back to normal. The normal shit. Anyway. It is funny how distracting. Nicotine is just so weird. I mean, sometimes you can go 4 hours without a cigarette and everything's fine. I don't have to go rushing to get a cigarette, you know, to get some nicotine. And other days, it's just 15 minutes is too long. You know, it's just funny. How addictions are interesting things. The nature of compulsive habit. So what else? Alright, well maybe I can do the relativity argument now that I... Yeah. Oh. There, now that I got a big giant nicotine hit, I can face it. Alright. So this is the absolute frame argument. So the Tim guy brought this up and kept harping on it. And so I went through the process of trying to think about it and put it into, you know, perspective and all that kind of crap and blah, blah, blah. To see if he's got a point. Oh, now this is broken. Oh, you're clicking the wrong thing, retard. Sorry. My mistake. Alright, we'll put that up there. Should be able to see if anybody says anything of merit or use or anything. No, you gotta do it that way, I guess. Anyway, alright. Okay, so we're going to do the absolute frame thing. We're going to say something has momentum in the absolute frame. So we're not moving in the universe. And we're just going to have two objects, or one mass and a two mass, but it doesn't matter because we're only going to do it in one direction, okay, for this case. But the point would be, see, I'm arguing that the argument against relativity is the fact that if in the absolute frame a one mass is moving, it has the velocity. So the velocity is set by how fast these two things are coming towards each other. And we are supposed to not be able to tell and all that kind of crap which one actually is moving. But the truth is, if this one's moving 1 mile an hour, okay, or this one's moving 1 mile an hour, it will be a different amount of momentum. And the outcome of the experiment will be different. Okay, you'll be able to see that there was a different amount of momentum. So that's my argument against relativity, is that there isn't any E equals mc squared equivalence between things. It's not equivalent. Alright, so, but for the sake of this one, okay, so we're in the 0 frame, and we're just going to say there's motion in this direction, okay, 1m, and this one's moving, one velocity, shit. Okay. Alright, this one's moving 1 velocity. So they already have 1 velocity. So they're going to start over here, and they're going to move across our frame. And what we're going to do is we're going to lift this one up. Alright, say it was a pendulum. We're just going to give it some gravitational energy. So we're going to lift it up, which is going to make it go faster forward. So it's going to gain a little distance from this one. So it's going to be over here, and it's going to have more distance from this one. That's what we're going to see as it's moving. So yeah, I'm just going through this step by step, and we'll just see if I make a mistake somewhere. So this one will go forward. It'll have acceleration up here, and then it's going to decelerate, okay, so fast, alright, that it's going to actually hit 0 here. So it's going to stop moving when it gets to here. And now it's going to be stagnant in our frame. So I'm going to swing it up. It's going to gravitationally swing down, alright, with a 2 velocity in a sense. Okay, but the 2 velocity is just negating the 1 velocity. No, it's a 1 velocity. It's in the opposite direction though. So it undoes this direction. So it's not gonna, the 2 is moving. I move it up, and then it comes back down and stops. So that's the tricky part, right? It's not going to go back to being one mass moving this way. It's going to actually be at its bottom 0. It's not going to be moving. And now the other object's going to crash into it. So this one's going to stop moving, and then this one's going to crash into it. So I think that's all accurate. So this one's the aggressor in this circumstance. So let me just make sure of this. So when you swing it up, you're accelerating it forward, and then it's going to go back to being a one mass moving in this direction, and then you're going to swing it, you're going to let it go down. So you're going to just have a little bit of a gravitational push in this direction, and its maximum speed is going to be exactly 0. So it's undoing the previous one it had. So it had a 1 velocity previously. I'm undoing the 1 velocity by adding a 1 velocity. And so by adding the 1 velocity, I've canceled the other velocity and now have 0 velocity. Now this one will crash into this one. Alright, now if they stuck together, this is kind of easy, but we're talking about elastic collisions. So the point is now we have to figure out what's going to happen when this one, who has the momentum, collides with this one. And the trick is it has to be, the energy has to basically be apportioned between these two objects, so you can understand the twice as massive object isn't going to go the same velocity as this. It's going to go much less, so something like a third. Okay, and this will take 2/3, and the other one will reflect at 1/3. So we basically have this stupid experiment again, right? yeah, we end up with the same dopey experiment, except we're going to conserve the momentum. Alright, so this object going 1 hits this object. This can't go as fast as this because this is twice the mass. So it has to go something less than, okay, twice the speed. Yeah. So now I knew this last night. Now I have to think now how I apportioned it. You have a total of 3 mass units, and so you're basically just going to apportion it as, okay, that this one is going to take 2/3 of the mass, the velocity units. Not velocity, it's the wrong way to say it. There's 1 unit of velocity, okay, that's all you have, it's 1 velocity, and you have it spread over 3 masses, okay, and so what you're basically going to say is 2/3 of this velocity goes into this object in terms of the momentum. So it's not 2/3 the actual velocity, it's 2/3 of the portion that would make this go, the 2 object go. So how do I know I wrote that in some form. See, I erased it when I made the first video. I erased what I drew last night. which is just so annoying. All right. So we have a one mass moving one velocity. Okay. And it's going to hit the two mass. The two mass is going to leave with something less than, okay, half the speed. So I guess we could say it's going to have to be, it could be 1/3 the velocity. That would leave 2/3 the velocity in the reflection, which I don't think is right. Alright, so this is failing. Let me try it going the other way. So, see, the point would be is that we're basically saying the Earth is traveling in a direction. So it has a pre-existing direction. Will the pre-existing direction mess up the experiment? I mean, will the two outcomes be different? And the argument's going to be is in both of these cases, this will not go zero. This will not go in opposite direction. All this one's going to do is go less than its, some portion of its forward direction. So that was the key point to make. It's never going to go to zero and then go the opposite direction. It's just going to go slower than it is now. So that was the point to make. Is that, so even though we're going to call it a reflection, it's not really going to reflect from the absolute frame's point of view. This one actually did stop. This one went zero and stopped. This one will never stop. It's going to hit and then reflect, okay, but it's 2/3 less velocity. So it has 2/3 less the velocity because it gave 2/3 of the momentum to this object. Yeah, 2/3 of its momentum. So now it only has 1/3 the velocity. So this one's going to go forward, okay, continue forward. So it was going 1, now it's only going to, 1 velocity, and now it's only going to go 1/3 velocity. And this one, because it's going to be going a little faster than that, because it got 2/3 the momentum, so it's going to be going closer to, I don't know what number to use for it, frankly. But you can understand that this was going at its peak velocity when it hit this. Okay. See, if I used the same size things, then it would be a lot easier. But anyway, so I'm spreading 2/3 divided by 2, which has to be 1/3, right? 1/3 the speed. Yeah, because it's twice as heavy. I keep forgetting this one's twice as massive. So this 1/3 is really a 2/3, but this has twice the math. So it's 2 times 1/3, 1 times 1/3, and that way you end up with the complete total answer of 1. So you got it all back. So this one never goes backwards. But what we'll see is that something that was stationary goes forward, and it leaves, okay, faster than the other thing. It lost more of its momentum. So the original thing is going slower than the thing you hit. And that means the thing you hit looks like it's getting further away from the other object. So it looks like they're separating. But they're really not. They're still moving in this direction. So from the zero frame, the whole thing keeps moving. And these two get separated. And the separation looks like this one's going this way and this one's going that way. But that's not happening. They're both going in the same direction. And this one's going faster, which it makes it look like that one's going backwards when it's not. Alright. So now we do the same experiment in the opposite direction. So now we put the 2 here and the 1 here. And we're going to go the same way. And we've just now reversed the experiment. Alright. And so now we're going to give the energy in what direction? We're going with so we're going to hit this one again. So this one again is going to be the one we give the energy to, is the 2 mass. And so it's in the absolute frame. So it was going 1 mass velocity. This one was going 1. Okay, we're obviously going to increase this now to 2. So this one, oh shit, I keep doing M's instead of V's. Alright. So now we're going to double the velocity of this one. So it has twice the velocity. So in this case it was 0. In this case it's got now twice the velocity. So if it was 1,000 miles an hour, they're both going, then you just say it's 1,002 here. Okay. No, you'd say it's 1,001 because it's 1 unit more than what it had. Oh, see, it's got to be so careful about how you use the language. All right, so now it's going to velocity, and so now what happens? Now it's this big thing is hitting the little thing. All right, and so we know that when it hits, the little thing is going to be absorbing the energy, but it can only absorb what this one has. So this one is at a peak momentum, okay, with a velocity component. It can give this one the full velocity because it's light, it's small. So the velocity goes into it easy. What doesn't go into it is the mass part. So this one will leave with the full 2. All right. So it'll end up having the 2 velocity. So from the 0 frame, they were moving along at 1, and now one of them is leaving with 2, and the other one's going to be much less than that because it had to give a big piece of its momentum away to this one to make it go 2, and so this one can't go 2 anymore. So it's going to be something less than 2. All right. So I could write that in lots of ways, but let's see how to do it. So this is 2, and this one is still going to be going more than 1, but less than 2. So greater than 1, but less than 2. Because it gave away a piece of the momentum, but only at the piece that was proportional to, again, the third, 2/3. So it's exactly the same scenario. This one, the extra energy it took to take from this one, the momentum, was only 1/3 of its momentum to get it up to 2 velocity. And this one now, okay, so this one's going 2, and this one's going to be going less than 2, but more than 1. And they're both going to look like they're going in opposite directions again, because they're going to be getting further and further apart from each other. But from the 0 frame, we'll see them both going in the same direction. Just like in the other case, they're both going in the same direction, and they're just going at the same differential. So it'll end up being the same thing, where 1/3 of the energy goes into this object to increase its velocity to 2, 1/3, and the other 2/3 is still in here, but that's 2/3 over twice as much mass, so it's technically only 1/3 per mass unit. So, but that's the 2/3, and that equals the 1. So there's no problem. In the absolute frame, there's no problem. You'll see the same thing no matter which way I did the experiment. Going with the energy, I'll see the same thing as if I go against the energy in terms of the outcome of the motions in the direction conserving the fact that, yeah, the energy going with it has to go in the same direction. And in this case, the fact that I put in stopping energy doesn't stop this object from spreading its energy and giving this one a velocity and this one a velocity commensurate to, let's see, so did I make a mistake there? I'm still doubtful about whether I got this one right. Yeah, we need 2/3 goes into this one, but that's spread over 2 mass, so that's 1/3 each. So they're going the same speed. So there might be a difference. This one might end up going the same speed. They both go off at the same speed. And in this case, well, wherever. The problem is that this problem exists no matter whether you have an absolute frame or a relative frame. The fact that these two experiments end up coming out differently, I mean, whether I have the little mass hitting the 2 mass or the 2 mass hitting the 1 mass. See, in this case, I'm technically converting. When I give the energy to the 2 mass in the opposite direction of its existing momentum, I'm essentially making this the object that's moving faster. So this is now the object that's hitting something not moving. And in this case, it's I gave the energy to the heavier object. It has more energy, and it's going to, and so it's exactly the opposite of what you're seeing in the frame we exist in, sharing the same direction. You have to remember that if you're going to view the experiment, you have to view it from the frame where you're going 1,000 miles an hour. So if I'm going 1,000 miles an hour and the experiment's going 1,000 miles an hour, I have to remember to keep continuing to go 1,000 miles an hour when I'm viewing it, the outcome, because the outcome's going to happen, and I'm supposed to show what's not moving in the same frame I'm moving in, and that's why, we see it backwards. Alright, well, anyway, maybe I'll try it again. But, I don't think you need to get into these complex relativity arguments to make the simple point that there are paradoxes that exist on their face. And the fact is that if I do have two trains and I just collide them into each other, I'm going to know which one had the momentum, because the absolute momentum, because the fact is the crash will happen differently depending on whether the one-mass train or the two-mass train was actually moving. You can't deny that the crash has a different amount of energy in it, depending on who's really moving. Okay. So, let's see. We'll see how many people are here and whether it's worth hanging around any longer and such. 11. It's not terrible, but it's not very good. yeah, that's what it is. Not terrible, but not very good. Okay, so I'll hang around a minute or two and then get out of here. I wish I had made that argument better, but it's kind of hard to draw, because you have to draw, it's like you have to do it in sequence, like just draw a sequence of drawings, I suppose, is the way to do it, and say what is it doing at each moment, what is each object doing, and what is the viewer seeing, because that's the trick of the absolute frame, is where you have to do this, or to make this argument, you have to have an absolute frame. Yes, you're looking at something, but the whole thing is moving across the field, and you're really just talking about how the two things change their positions relative to each other as they move in the same direction they were going. And the fact is that if something moves slower than the other thing, it's going to look like it's going the opposite direction when it's not. I guess it's going to look like the opposite direction if you move with it. But from the rest frame, there should be a clear distinction. There still should be a clear distinction from one thing going that way to the other thing going that way, and it's only because we're in a frame that isn't the rest frame. How does the moving frame create the illusion of the opposite direction? That's the trick. So that's the part I messed up somewhere. See, if I move with the two things that are separating in distance, and I'm moving with the one that's going the fastest of the two things, then the slower thing is going to look like it's going the opposite direction. But it's not. It's just going slower in the same direction. So that's the illusion. That's the perceptual problem. That's a dramatic difference in how you're seeing things. So if you're moving with the experiment, it looks like one of the objects is going left and one's going right. And if you're not moving with it, all you're seeing is one's going faster than the other in the same direction. That's a pretty dramatic difference. Yeah. It's a very dramatic difference, you could say. So I can put this over here. It doesn't really matter. I don't need to see that. Certainly don't need to see that crap. I could do the analytics thing. Not very interesting either. So 12. Let's see if anybody has anything to say on free momentum. Da-da-da-da. Do levers conserve momentum? Does anything conserve momentum? Is there a law that you have to conserve momentum? and such. Thanks for going over the relativity example. Yeah, I didn't do a great job. I think you hit on what I was trying to get at. Yes, I saw what you were getting at, and that's why I thought about it, and I did all this trouble, and I just didn't do a great job. But if you really follow it, you end up with this, this one answer, But yeah, I got to prove it better. The problem is you can't determine something's velocity without other objects to compare it to. Well, I'm just saying that, frankly, exactly. But that's just like saying you can't do it without a ruler. Yeah, you do have to have a ruler. You can't measure something without some kind of ruler. But I'm just saying if you already know you're in the absolute frame, you know it. Okay, it's a given. There's no problem measuring other things' distance from you. I mean, having an absolute frame is not denying relativity. It's denying that you're the one with the theory that's exclusionary. You're saying it's relativity and no absolute. I'm saying it's relativity and an absolute. So you're the one that sort of has to prove there's no absolute frame. And I'm making the simple argument that I can defend the absolute frame by just pointing out that if two trains crash into each other, okay, and the heavy train was doing the moving, the crash is going to look different than if the light train. If a 100-pound train hits a 200-pound train that's not moving, it's going to look a lot different than if the 200-pound train hits the 100-pound train that's not moving. The two crashes aren't the same, so it just kind of blows up this equivalency crap. They're not equivalent. It's not a matter of perspective. Which one had momentum? It's just the truth. One of them has twice as much momentum. The crash has twice as much momentum one way than the other way. I'm just saying that's an argument against your notion of absolute relativity. Or exclusionary relativity, however this right way to say that, relativity without any absolutes. There can't be relativity without any absolutes because that reality sticks. Yes, one had twice as much momentum relative to... No, the same thing's going to happen in space. So saying relative to Earth doesn't mean anything. In space, if the big planet has the momentum and it crashes into a little asteroid, it's going to look different than if the little asteroid crashes into the big planet. Big things can give their velocity away, and little things can give their mass away, so to speak. But they can't do the inverse. They're both stuck being incompetent. Little things can't give fast velocities to big things, and big things can't give their storage of energy to little things. So they can't convert the momentum. So whichever one has the real momentum, it's going to make a difference. I suppose that's how you should think of the experiment. I mean, yeah, so you have two different objects. They come at each other at the same speed in space, you're saying that it doesn't matter whether the little thing with the smaller momentum hits the big thing, or whether the big thing with the bigger momentum hits the smaller thing. And I'm saying that those two crashes have to look different because of the reflecting thing. The little thing is going to reflect. The big thing isn't. So when the big thing has the momentum, it's going to push the little thing with it, and they're both going to go off this way. When the little thing hits, it's going to hit, do a tiny exchange and reflect, and they're going to be separating in distance, in direction. No, you're not moving with any objects. That's the whole point of doing it in space. You're not moving with any objects. You just have a fact that the big one hits the little thing happening right in front of you. Okay, you're in the absolute frame. You're not moving. The little thing isn't moving. The big thing comes, it hits, and it moves it. Now, the little thing comes, and unless you're going to say it doesn't technically reflect. Now, that's a valid argument, in the sense that, let's say it hits, and what it really does is it pushes this one, okay, and this one still retains a little this way. So it's going 1/3 this way, and 2/3 this is going faster. So this one, they're separating, but from the still frame, I can see that this one's still leaving. That might be a valid argument, but it still doesn't undo the fact that the absolute frame works just fine. There's nothing prohibiting the existence of the absolute frame. There's just an argument saying the Earth reference of moving 1,000 miles an hour with the experiment gives you the illusion that any time two things separate, that one's going the opposite direction, because you're still moving 1,000 miles an hour this way. So even though they're both moving with you, because one is moving slower than you are going forward, slower than you are going forward looks like backward. So that's the catch. Slower than you're moving forward. Anything slower than your speed looks like backwards, but it isn't backwards. It's just slower. See, I still don't think it could be slower than you're going, though. Be slower than you're going is faster than zero. So you never stopped. So that wouldn't make sense either. I have to think it through some more. If those crashes look different, you should be able to, inside the windowless box at the constant velocity, you should be able to be inside the windowless box at a constant velocity. We're not really talking about frames and boxes and stupid rules. We're saying, what's the real truth, and is there a way to find it? Okay, and do this experiment to determine what direction you are going. So again, this is just, it's not about you going somewhere. It's about dissecting whether the things that are separating in distance are still moving, or whether there's an actual reversal in direction. But whatever. I mean, look, the whole idea that you have a theory dependent on no windows in your spaceship, and no this and no that, all these conditions you create that are just silly, frankly. I mean, I'm almost saying you don't have a right to have those kinds of conditions. You know, oh, you can't crash the things into each other. Well, of course, that's the easiest way to find out who's moving. But the fact that you do have to conserve the momentum does indicate that it can't matter, because all you can do is, you only have a certain amount of change that you've created, and you can't, yeah, well, anyway, I have to redraw it again, and I'll think about, so in space, in a zero frame in space, well, that's sort of what I was doing. Yeah, so the real question is the separation is the key difference. In one case, the two objects let's see. Now, in both cases, they're separating. Yeah, so the question is just whether separation is a real direction change. And so the simple argument is no, you don't have to change the direction to create a separation that could look like a change in direction if you were going the same speed as the faster object. Yeah. So when the lighter thing hits the heavier thing, it never goes zero velocity, would be the argument. So it never goes through zero. So therefore can't be going the opposite direction. So all that really happens is the lighter thing hits the heavier thing leaves faster than the lighter thing is going. It will be going, because the lighter thing definitely lost momentum to the bigger thing to give it the full velocity. So it couldn't give it the full velocity. That's the catch. Couldn't give it the full velocity. It has. So it has to reject some portion of the velocity. Yeah, how much of the velocity it rejects. So it's just that reflection part. So it's going it's just going less fast in the same direction. So it does continue going the same direction. It just gives this one more velocity than it retains. So it's going slower, and the slower looks like the opposite direction. But it isn't. So then the two experiments would be the same. Yeah, well, I'll have to think it through. But anyway, the point is that I don't know, you're chosen to destroy the idea of a physical three-dimensional universe, and I'm saying you don't have much evidence to do that based on, and there's certainly no evidence that there is no such thing. So you haven't proven the non-existence of an absolute frame in any way. In other words, if there is an absolute velocity, you can't determine it. You can, because you're in the zero frame, so you're going to see them both going off at the same direction, and one's going faster than the other. How is that not seeing it? Not determining it? You'll see them separating in distance. So how is that not seeing the difference between them? Of course you'll see it. I mean, you really think, I can't believe that I have to have this strangled argument about something so obvious. So you really think if there's two simultaneous events, and just because you can't tell when they happened because you have to wait for photons to get to you, that you're going to claim they weren't simultaneous merely because you change your position. You change your position looking at the two events, and you know there's photons, and you know it takes time for the photons to get to you. You're going to deny the fact that they are simultaneous merely because you're saying I'm not looking at them from the exact center. Therefore, they didn't happen at the same time because I don't have the right perspective. I mean, you can't concede that that's ludicrous, that you have no right to do that, to project your consciousness as being somehow relevant to when the events took place in time. You're going to say they didn't happen at the same time because the way you're looking at it, you didn't see it that way? I mean, it's just so arrogant and crazy. I mean, you're really just, you have human way up your ass, don't you? I mean, it's just such a stupid argument. I mean, how can you people believe that? That no events that are simultaneous ever happen because I can just change my frame and pretend it didn't happen at the same time. Of course it did. I mean, you could have two volcanoes on Earth and they erupt on opposite sides of the Earth and they erupt at the same time. And you're going to say because different people heard it at a different time, it means it happened at a different time. I'm sorry. It's just, I'm saying this is ludicrous that you actually believe this shit. All right, says you are correct. There could still be an absolute frame. It isn't been proven incorrect. Physicists gives absolute frame a fancy name or whatever that is, a preferred foliation of space or something. Yeah, well, whatever. I mean, they change things names for a reason, to obscure the reality. You know, that's all they change names for, is to make things disappear that they don't want to exist. It's like, you know, Leonard Susskind teaching Einstein's relativity and doing it with dynamics, you know, fluid dynamics, and he calls it an anti-divergence. I mean, you know, instead of saying convergence, right, he says anti-divergence. I mean, why would somebody do that, right? Why would you manipulate language like that? And the only reason why he manipulates the language is because anti-divergence, okay, doesn't give it away. When you say convergence, that's vacuum cleaner, right? I mean, that's, you know, something sucking from all directions. So if I say convergence, then I have to explain the thing in the center sucking. But if I say an anti-divergence, well, that'll confuse people, and they won't realize, well, anti-divergence means everything's going to one point. Anti-divergence makes it sound like it's going all over the place, right? Anti-divergence sounds confusing and chaotic, when it's exactly the opposite. And, you know, but these are the word games they play. I mean, I was amazed when I watched the lecture and he said the words anti-divergence, and why did you do that? Why would you call something an anti-push? Right? I mean, that's all he's saying, right? I want to say pull, but I don't want to say pull, so I'll say an anti-push. You know, it's such a manipulation. The best you can do is assume there's an absolute velocity. Assume. Because the only way to determine velocity is by randomly choosing a frame out of an infinite list of frames. So I'm just saying, no, there's absolutely no reason for that to be the default, is the invention of frames. The default should be there's 3 dimensions, and I can sit in the 3 dimensions in a quiet place, and I can observe everything else's motion relative to my non-motion. That's the rational default, and you're saying there's some reason to go away from the rational default to play your game. And I will call that a word game, right? First, there is no random, and then what are these frames? What the fuck are you talking about? In an absolute universe of 3 dimensions, there's no fucking frames. Okay, there's no need for them. They don't serve any purpose. This is just like the kinetic energy theory. You're saying there's some reason to believe in this mv squared thing. I'm saying it's completely useless and always gets wrong answer, so why bother with it? And I'll say the same thing about your frames. You do not undo simultaneous. You do not undo that the time is in one direction. You don't undo any of these facts. And there's a 3-dimensional physical universe, and things don't just magically jump from place to place. They have to be pushed by a force. I mean, it's all perfectly visible without your purple glasses or pink glasses or whatever, spotted glasses. I don't need to put those on to see better. I'm saying frame is just mv squared, okay? That's all frame is. Frame is just an invention. There's absolutely no evidence that I can frame myself, that I can exist in anything called a frame. There's evidence that I exist in 3 dimensions of space, and that's all there is evidence of. It is randomly chosen a frame out of an infinite list of frames, thus you most likely wrong. Thus you most likely wrong. Again, just complete crap. I just stated clearly you can use your eyes, you could use lots of other measuring devices and measure how things are moving relative to you. So not a problem at all. You can model it perfectly, okay? You can just put a zero thing in the space and I can have energy in a system and I can just watch the energy move around while the zero thing just sits there. I don't need to create any frames. I'm just please, if one of you two, Virgo or Tim, just deal with the simultaneous argument. Do you really believe that just because I move my position, I somehow change what the things I'm looking at are? That somehow they don't have their own properties, they don't have their own events, they don't have their own reality, and that somehow I can pretend their reality is different because I saw it sooner or I saw it later. I mean, the murder doesn't happen until I read it in the New York Times. So until the New York Times gets to me and says my neighbor was murdered, my neighbor's not dead. I mean, it's almost a Schrodinger cat ludicrousy. I mean, how can you argue that you're going to change what the physical reality was in the three-dimensional space by changing your fucking frame perspective thingy? You know, frame was invented. Yeah, exactly. Because we can't determine how we may or may not be moving. Well, I think we can model the three-dimensional universe and we can figure it out. And you're just giving up and saying, no, we can't. You're just Heisenberging, right? We can't see photons, so therefore we can pretend they are not in any location. You know, we can pretend lots of stuff about photons because we can't see one. So every place we can't see, you decide to turn it into a bent, crookedy space. And I'm saying there's absolutely no reason to do that. No reason to add this extra piece of crap. Again, if we went with Newton's mechanics and just built on that and made a work equation that was rational, force times time, not force times distance, you know, everything would work just fine. We'd be able to build bridges and land on the moon. Because we did land on the moon without any of that extra fancy, framey crappy. We didn't use frames to land on the moon. Didn't use mv squared to land on the moon. Didn't use any theory that there's no such thing as simultaneous events because of, you know, that didn't land us on the moon. Yeah, I don't think the frame changes what actually happened. Okay. So then the argument is if it can't change what actually happened, then of what value is it? You're just saying that our perception is broken by being poorly aligned, confused, distorted. And that's it. Yeah, so let's just concede we can have a distorted perspective. We can't see the front of the elephant and the back of the elephant at the same time, you know, unless we use some mirror or some other kind of catch. All right. Your frame can affect what order you see something in, but that's it. Yeah, and so what does seeing something have to do with its reality? I'm saying it has absolutely nothing to do with whether it has momentum or whether it has this or it has that. Yes, our perspective can fuck it up, what we see. But the fact is it has a reality in the three dimensions. So in a way, you're conceding my point. I'm looking for a good, cheap, free physics simulator, but can't seem to find one yet. Well, I don't know what you would think they would simulate, for fuck's sake. I mean, there's tons of simulators. I mean, that guy the Action Lab guy linked to a simulator that pretends there's unmatter, or whatever the fuck he called it, negative matter. And it's just complete made up shit. I mean, it's not worth anything. It's a complete, you know, silly bit of, you know, whatever, physics porn. You know, it doesn't have any, you know, it's not real. I mean, it's not like it's a, You know, it's not like it's just a theater. You know, it's a show. It's not. That doesn't have anything to do with the go. They don't know how charge works. They think there's a strong force, you know, pushing protons together. If you modeled their physics, it would be ridiculous because they have to invent magical forces that poof out of nowhere and then disappear and do all kinds of things. I mean, it's just crap. I mean, bent space ends up being a vacuum cleaner. If they tried to simulate it, they have to simulate it as a vacuum cleaner. It just keeps sucking, and yet the air doesn't go anywhere. So all the air it sucked doesn't go anywhere, except magically poofs into space. You know, space is expanding, so it's just magically poofing. Poof, 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 poof. Yeah. I mean, it's a ridiculous model. And it doesn't poof inside of planets, obviously. So the extra space is created out there, but somehow it's not created inside molecules. Because if it was created inside molecules, then all atoms would have a half-life and drop dead from expansion tensions. Yeah, I mean, even the whole idea of creating extra space and then saying bent space is a constant value. Well, obviously, there's no point in saying that bent space is a constant. You know, there's no point in saying that the gravitational constant is a constant. Because if you're making more space, then you have to be diminishing the strength of gravity. If you believe in bent space, you'd have to believe that, oh, you're making a broader well. I mean, the inverse square law becomes kind of meaningless if you're changing the r. Okay, if you're changing the r squared, it's not going to work anymore. How much distance an r is. How would you find an absolute frame? So that's the photon again. So what can be logically stated is that any piece of radiation energy, okay, stuff moving the speed of light, if you can take that and consistently create one, just one, okay, then you can use that as a ruler because that's an absolute frame. That's an absolute direction. It's a straight line. It's all the things you need to understand where the absolute frame is. And the trouble is that yes, you're working with stuff moving the speed of light. That's really hard to control. And the very idea that we can even do a single photon, let alone a single piece of what photons are made out of, right? So if I'm right, and you know, a photon is really a collection of force bits. You need one of the force bits. The photon's not going to help you any because that's going to get distorted by your velocity. You can't admit it anymore. If the matter you're emitting a photon with is moving, and it takes time to make a photon, that is, the electricity has to move at the speed of light through the atoms before the photon is created. So the creation of the photon takes time. Then you're going to understand the faster you're moving the atoms that are creating the photon ends up being spread over a much larger piece of distance and you lose the code. So there's lots of reasons to understand that, but clearly that's the way. So how would you find the absolute frame? Photons. So if you could control what makes a photon, the elemental bits, if you can control one of those bits, understand its, be able to separate it from the environment, make an empty space and create this little bit in it, then you could find the absolute frame. The trouble of different observers would both argue that they are the rest frame and there is no experiment either frame can do to prove they are correct frame at rest. Well, again, I'll argue that the photon, the light clock, is a sort of getting there experiment. I mean, Einstein said it both ways. I mean, he conceded half the argument. He conceded the surface is moving and the photon moves straight. And then he made the argument that somehow I could draw a line, okay, because this is line, I can make this triangle. And I can't really do that because that doesn't really happen. That's not how the photon actually moves across the space. It doesn't travel this path at all. It travels straight across, and you can say that this moves, and so you could say it moves this way. You know, as this wall moves, the photon goes this much, and then it goes this much, and then it goes this much, but it still gets from here to here exactly at the speed of light. It doesn't travel any longer distance. I'm just saying the light clock is complicated in the sense that you have to recognize that if you're moving the target and the photon is completely dependent on hitting more than one atom. So my argument is, you can say to me that all I have to do is hit one single electron with a photon, and that's a photon. That one electron can make a photon. I'm arguing that isn't how photons work. They're not that small. They're much bigger than that. Their polarization alone, okay, is 1,000 atoms across. Their wavelength is, well, 500. At least a minimum of 500 atoms of wavelength alone. You're saying that something is going to move into something else and nothing's going to move its position when the wavelength can be huge. Especially a radio wave. You're talking an insane amount of distance, which means an insane amount of time before one part of the photon gets, the wavelength can get completed. How could that possibly hit one electron? How could you think one electron is going to stand still for the time it takes for an entire 1 mile wave to hit it? It's not possible. Alright, how do you know that all the force bits aren't moving in a direction? They are all moving in a direction. Different directions. There's a trillion of them going this way. There's a trillion of them going that way. There's a trillion of them going that way. There's a trillion of them going that way. I mean, I don't know. What do you want me to say? They're moving in all the dimensions. There are little bits of force moving in some direction. And the only ones that hit you are heading right for you. Just turns out that way. Those are the only ones that can hit you, are the ones heading for you. The ones that aren't heading for you don't hit you. Well, how do I know? I don't know. I'm just saying that every experiment done indicates this tendency, okay, for straight lines to be created. And you could argue that all of Maxwell's equations won't work unless the field lines are the lines of force. The lines of force have to be really precise lines of force, or the math completely falls apart. So it's all straight lines. There's all kinds of places where you can find the straight line nature, the rays of light from the sun. I mean, lots of things you can figure out. It's straight lines. The photon's traveling 13 billion years to get here. We don't have some idea that they just got here by wackiness. It's pretty much a concession that it traveled a straight line to us. I'm just saying there's no reason to make the cartoon characters. You can build the mechanical universe out without any cartoon characters. You don't have to make up Red Riding Hoods and 3 pigs and 3 blind mice and all this kind of crap. You can do it with the real shit. The simple shit. The material shit. There really aren't any experiments that can't be reasonably explained. So I would argue that the 2 slit is the big source of the big fraud, right? Because it's supposed to be somehow magical, unexplainable. How did this possibly happen? And you can simply explain it, okay? This is an experiment. This is an experiment. The only distance in this experiment is this distance. The only distance in this experiment is this distance. I bring the 2 things together. What have I created? I've created this distance, and I've created this distance. Very different circumstance, right? So you can understand, yeah, taking this and combining them, I'm going to create a pattern that has 2 elements to it. It's going to reveal this distance, and it's going to reveal this distance, between the surfaces. And that works. That explains the pattern really well. Explains why there's little bars and explains why there's an envelope. It's all explained. Something physics hasn't done in 200 fucking years is well explain it. That well explains it. I'm just saying I don't need to believe that the photon went through both slits and all this other crap happened. All I have to understand is that surfaces break photons, the broken pieces fly, and there's a 50-50 chance that it's going to be going in phase or out of phase. The pieces. They'll either be back in phase or they'll be out of phase. 50-50 chance. The pieces will be a phase match. And so I create a 50-50 pattern. Well, theoretically 50-50, but obviously it doesn't come out that way in real life. Because obviously a photon that's a little bit off, a little bit off in your frequency distance, a little bit off doesn't make any difference. So I'm just saying, the whole mystique, all of this reason to create the fairy stories is all based on a misinterpretation of simple experiments. So I could just say the simple experiment of gravity. You drop something from 4 times the height, and it goes twice the velocity, it takes twice as long to fall, and it weighs twice as much, and yet you see the 4, and that's it. You can't see any further. It's as far as you go. So you see the double slit pattern, you see the confusing bars, and your brain explodes, and you have to start talking fairy stories. I'm just saying you don't need a fairy story. You can understand that gravity is happening every second, every millisecond, every trillisecond. An amount of this force is impacting you. So in a trillisecond, it's a trillisecond of force. In a millisecond, it's a millisecond of force. It's hitting you like a rain, and you're just collecting it. So if you're in it twice as long, well, then you have twice as much of its energy, twice as much hitting happened. Not 4 times as much, just twice as much. What about electrons? Do they break apart? No. What the fuck? The electrons are moving this way on the surface. They're moving. They're Brownian motioning. All right, and the tendency is going to go in and out. That's the preferred direction of an electron, is to leave the surface and go back into the surface. That's the preferred direction. So you're just doing the mechanics of a thing going this way. You're going to hit little bits going this way, and it's going to poke some of them that way, and then sometimes it's going to hit them this way, and sometimes it's going to hit them that way. So they're going to scatter. You're going to scatter them in these 2 directions because the electron has energy this way. Mostly. I mean, yes, it does this, but I'm just saying it's mostly the vector is in this direction. And every time it hits the electron, so the electron's going this way, it hits the electron travels that new direction. The new direction means it's just pushed into the universe. It's just pushed into the universe. That's the new photon it's creating, the new element. So it's now pushing force, reflecting force sooner, which means the force is going to now go where it was going to go sooner. If it hits here, back here, it's going to take it a while to get there. But if I move the hand here, now it's going to reflect much sooner. So I've compressed the force, essentially. I've taken force that was spread out over this distance, and I've compressed it into this distance. By moving my hand, I've compressed the force. That's the little signal that's going to be flying into space. So I've taken the compression that hit the electron, I've changed its direction, forced the electron to go in a new direction, compressed space in a new direction. All right, and that's where the element of the photon is now going, is in that new direction. So I'm scattering the force bits with the electrons. The electrons never break. The movement of an electron in a field of energy is force. If I was the only thing in the universe, and I just put me in the universe, and there's a BBs flying around hitting me, and they're bouncing off of me, and I'm in a container full of BBs, and then I move me, boom, in a direction, you can understand that I'm going to reflect more BBs in the direction I'm moving. I'm going to give them essentially a tighter frequency. The distance between those BBs is going to be smaller than the distance between the BBs where I'm leaving. The distance where I'm leaving, they never get reflected, so I've created a big empty space. No reflections coming off of me. And I made more reflections off of me in the other direction. So I've compressed the BBs in forward, and I've expanded the BBs behind me. They bounce off each other and scatter. No, whatever that means. I don't know what bounce off each other. What did I have an each other in here? The electrons are in pressure between protons at an attractive nucleus and other electrons. So that's why they're in a balance between hating the electrons and loving the proton. So they're stuck in a pressure, but that pressure isn't consistent. So they wobble constantly moving little directions. But they're in equilibrium, so any movement always has a counter movement to it essentially. Okay, they move they want to get as close as they can to the proton and as far from the electrons as possible, and they're stuck in that tension. I think you can understand that. All right, now the little force bits come in and disturb the tension. And the fact is that the electron's going to want to move back, okay? But you're going to change its direction. And that's the key point. You're going to change its direction. And what direction it's moving decides how much compression or energy it's giving off. You're essentially changing the direction of its heat. So it has heat going, say, everywhere. And you're going to basically, by initiating an action, you're going to create heat in one direction. More in that direction. I'm sorry, yeah, it's just not responsive. They bounce off each other and scatter. I don't know what you're talking about. The force doesn't affect the force. The force has to hit matter. When matter moves, it affects the force. That's the arrangement. Force can only hit force using a matter conduit. The matter is a catalyst for force hitting force. Without matter, force can't interact. I could argue that force can't interact in a way that you would see the difference. Because the argument would be is if force does hit force, it just reverses. They just exchange what they had. You know, this one gives this one its direction, and this one gives that one its direction, so nothing's really changed in the universe. You have exactly the same universe. You can't tell the difference. This happens. You can't tell the difference. There's stuff going this way, stuff going that way. Nothing changed. But matter makes it visible. Because matter changes the direction. Because now when you hit something, you hit the piece of matter, it changes the vector because of its own mass, forcing there to be a blending of this vector with the other vectors it already has, and you get a new vector. Forces can't create new vectors. They need the mass, the matter, to make it possible to change the vector of the direction of the force. Whatever. I mean, the simple model does work. It's just that nobody tried to make the simple model work. Nobody in the last 200 years. I mean, you know, once they went wave, they turned the universe into mush. And they can call it particle physics, but obviously it's not particle physics. They don't believe in particles. They don't believe in 3 dimensions. I mean, all of that just blows up any notion of these words meaning anything. All right, how can you have reflections showing a fairly clean image if the light is scattered? Well, you can't. So, you want to say that the double slit is going to project image data. I would argue, no, it's not. Now, if you take a diffraction gradient, you will get image data because each little tiny scattering, okay, is more precise in terms of it's averaged out. So the volume going in is going to be reflected in a volume coming out, and you'll have a duplicate image in the different blue light, red light, green light. Let's see how else to say it. So this goes back to the Eddington experiment, right? So that's why the Eddington experiment is so important, because it's image data, right? Other scatter can, I can get radio waves and I can put them through the corona of the sun, and I can guarantee that essentially the light's going to go everywhere. So I could go to any location and say, I got it sooner than I should have, right? So there's a source behind the sun. The light's going to be diffracted in all directions, so this has no image data anymore. And I'm going to see it here, and I'm going to see it here. And no matter where I go, I'm going to see an image of that radio signal. Because no matter where I go, some portion of the scatter is going to get to me. The scatter is going to go everywhere, but I'll have no image data. So that's why their lensing images are so interesting. It's because theoretically you shouldn't be able to image a galaxy. So if you can see individual stars in a lensed image, it's got to be bullshit, because there's no depth to the lens. The lens only exists in a tiny fraction of space, and there's no way you could image from different sources, because those would be the wrong angles. So there's no way to get, it's not a lens. It's just a portion of a lens in space. You don't have a full lens, because gravity is the opposite. It bends the light too much going in, and it bends it too little going out. So it does exactly the opposite of what a lens does. So you shouldn't be able to get any image data. And yet they show clearly in the middle of their lensed image full galaxies. Not possible. Einstein would say that can't happen. I thought it was thousands of photons taken to image the galaxy. Thousands? Well, I don't even know what you're talking about. I thought it was thousands of photons taken to image the galaxy. They're all time-lapse photos. I mean, obviously, because there's so few photons coming in. But again, you can't image from different locations. You can't angularly create this image coming from the right location. You can't have a different angle you come in at, because the bending would be wrong. You can only come in from one specific angle and have one specific reflection that's going to be create at any one location in space. So there's no way for two parallel photons to be hit with the same amount of gravity. Therefore, they're not going to bend the same amount. Therefore, they can't show up at the same telescope. You're talking about a huge amount of gravity to bend light. Okay, so just understand that there's, even from that perspective, you can understand that, wow, it'd be very, very difficult. Not only is the mathematics impossible, but the fact is that you have to travel those distances staying parallel, perfectly parallel, and then go through your gravity lens and be affected exactly right. It's just not possible. I mean, that much gravity, a tiny difference in the amount. You're talking about a ton of gravity, and a tiny difference is all you need. So in that huge, you're trying to make a duplicate 1 ton, exactly 1 ton of energy. And there's no chance that the different locations wouldn't be, 99.9 and 99.9999, all kinds of numbers, but they're not going to be exact. I mean, two different paths can't have exactly the same gravitational tension is the argument. Can't be, it's not possible. But yes, of course, it's more than one photon that makes an image. Yeah. Billions, frankly. Well, millions anyway, right? I don't know if we can make a photo with less than 1,000,000 photons. I don't know. Alrighty then. Well, maybe we'll call it a video. Ugh, probably done, 2.5 hours. That's enough. Ugh. So, well, all in all, did what I needed to do. The relativity argument will need some more teasing, but the basic argument I'm making is there's certainly no evidence excluding the possibility that there are 3 physical dimensions, and that's all, 90 degrees from each other. Technically, and no 4th one or 5th or 6th, and that everything has a place in those 3 dimensions, and all things can do is be moving towards each other or moving away from each other, and they can do that movement frankly as a truth because one of them's probably really moving and the other one may not be, that kind of thing. They can both be moving or one of them cannot be moving. It is perfectly reasonable to believe that there are things in the universe that aren't doing much. Do you still hate solar technology? I mean, it's a silly thing to say. I don't hate it. I guess I love it so much that I appreciate what its facts are and its truth is. And the truth is, it's really stupid to put them on roofs. It's really stupid not to maximize their performance. And to maximize their performance, they always have to move with the sun. If they're not moving with the sun, they're only getting 40% of the sunlight that's possible to glean. And that's a waste of an expensive technology. It's it's just wasting the technology. That's my complaint. I don't like when things are wasted grotesquely so capitalists can make money. And all the exploitation, the third world country mineral exploitation, all the crap that goes into it too, that's all kind of dirty and slimy. The stupid subsidies, why should we be subsidizing it? There's no point in subsidizing it. It either performs better or it doesn't. Okay, And the fact is that's a question, just like electric cars. I mean, yeah, it's nice for city life, makes your little city environment less polluted, and you're just polluting someplace else instead. Okay, fine, but tell the truth. You're not saving energy. You're not stopping pollution. I don't like lies. Frankly, there's a lot of lying going on about solar technology. It's not as clean as they argue. It's not as cheap as they argue. It's not as efficient as they argue. I wish they were subsidizing small-scale hydro, because frankly, we should always take advantage of water falling. That's a really good one. And, just no reason except for some environmental bullshit. Put the fish in zoos, okay? Fish are easy to keep alive, frankly. So just put all the fish in zoos. Okay, we don't really need them in the stream, blah, 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 blah. Come on. There's a point where you just say, come on, for one fucking species of fish that's not very hardy, the other fish can take it just fine. I mean, they figured out how to do it, and salmon can still do their thing. Lots of things can still do their thing. You don't have to disrupt nature that much. And, it's basically really cheap, free energy because it's easy to maintain. The The generators can last for decades. I mean, the whole thing, it's really good, reliable technology. We should exploit the fuck out of it. Yeah, exactly. So my argument against solar is that 97% of the solar panels are on a fucking roof, and 97% should be on a fucking farm. It's exactly my fucking argument. Make them 3 times, 4 times more efficient, and that, again, you only need one converter. All right, so you only, because the solar panels are producing DC electricity, you only need one converter. On a farm. You don't need a bunch of converters on each different thing, wasting a certain percentage of the energy in conversion. A bunch of wasteful hot transformers, essentially. Why heat a bunch of transformers when you don't need to? So it gets incredibly more efficient on a farm. Why aren't we subsidizing solar farms? Why doesn't a guy come to my house and say, do you want to join a collective where we're just going to make a solar farm? We're going to buy a piece of property, put the solar panels on it, okay, and, have a maintenance contract with this XYZ company, and that's it. That I'll buy. But you want to sell them and put them on my roof? Fuck you. I mean, I'm not a socialist by force. I'm a socialist. We should be making the choice of doing the socially responsible thing, which is get 4 times more energy out of the solar panels by doing it right instead of doing it wrong. I mean, it should be a social responsibility that we not waste or squander because we personally want to own them. Fuck that shit. It's just too silly. The solar farms here, so that's funny they said here. I mean, places like Australia even, they didn't, I don't think they had their first solar farm until like 2010. I mean, it's kind of amazing. And you're saying that they did, they've been doing this technology and doing this, and it's like Warbles Arnalot sticking the damn thing on his car. I mean, it's so fucking stupid. Why would you put it on the car? That's a dumb place to put it. Oh God, it's the the roof thing is just a scam. Exactly. So we just wanted to make a bunch of small businessmen happy and make them all have their own little companies and make a big pile of money, exploiting people with the wrong solution, instead of subsidizing what they should have subsidized, which is solar farms. They should have subsidized some company, okay, that comes up with the idea of, we'll buy a piece of property, put a bunch of solar panels on it, and give you a percentage of the electricity. Yeah. So instead of doing it the right way, they do it a completely wrong way, and everybody just says, okay. And how many dissenters are there? How many other people? Where have you heard any social commentary pointing out how roofs are insanely stupid? It's the worst, wrong place to put solar panels. Yeah, well, you live in a very socialist kind of environment, so maybe they thought about it ahead of time and said, yes, we can make 4 times more electricity, productive electricity, if we do it the right way instead of the wrong way. But you're obviously in the wrong latitude, so you're not going to get much out of it anyway. I mean, you're really squeezing the technology, in Ontario. I mean, that's really forcing solar panels to do what they're not made to do. I mean, you do have the forever light thing, but it's pretty weak solar energy. Yeah, well, just north of New York is the, the North Pole. I mean, come on. New York goes pretty far up. Just north of Niagara Falls, which is just west of Maine. Alrighty then. Well, I guess that's enough. But anyway, so yeah, I'm pro solar. I'm just anti lies and inefficiency and waste. But apparently those aren't important words to people anymore. Lie, waste, and inefficiency. Those don't mean anything to anybody anymore. See, when I grew up, those were all kind of important words. It's just now they're just, who cares? Alright, so till the next time, and such and so forth and whatnot. Blah, 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 and such. Alright. Yeah, I think I've done enough. Yeah, I've done enough. Almost, well. Yeah. I probably should wait till it's 3/4. Because I'm over 2/3, right? Yeah. No, I'm at, 2/3. Well, I'm not going to do the math. Forget it. Okay, anyway, it doesn't matter. Till the next